Okay, so today I'm going to be discussing developing on Enduro. We'll be going over a few things. My specialty is primarily with Coordinate, the Bitcoin-focused sidechain. We also have an EVM-compatible sidechain, Alice, as well. So that's kind of what my perspective is coming from. So yeah, the topics today are going to be basically what is Enduro, discussing Coordinate primarily, but there will be some touches of Alice as well. Sources and standing up, how do you get a hold of the source code? How do you build it? How do you even run a node so you can view this blockchain? Compatibility, and then the RPC interface as well. And then I got a couple of gotchas that you might experience during your first cycle of or first round of development on any Enduro product, specifically Coordinate though. And then the last is kind of just tools and resources so that you understand where you can go to find out more about how to build, and if you get stuck, you can click these links and then basically go to them to help you debug your code. Okay, so apparently it didn't scale right here, but nonetheless, what even is Enduro? So the definition of Enduro, really, it's the name of the collective that federates a multi-sidechain ecosystem on Bitcoin. There are currently two chains that are supported by Enduro right now. Those are the Alice and Coordinate chains. Again, like I went over, EVM is the Alice chain. The Bitcoin-like chain is Coordinate. So both of them are pegged one-to-one with Bitcoin as the native asset. This gives builders the ability to create, I gotta back up. So currently, these are both in beta, an open beta for that matter. So the GitHub repository is up and running right now, and you can build this stuff, but they're only built against testnet, so testnet 3 specifically. So, and the reason why is right now, this gives builders the ability to build on top of Enduro without having to worry about losing or dealing with the cost of basically experimenting on Bitcoin mainnet. Okay, so Coordinate is a Bitcoin compatible sidechain that focuses, I'm kind of getting killed. I'm not used to this kind of format. Okay, yes, focuses on settlement, because Coordinate has the pre-confirmed transactions, which have a final settlement every 1 minute, and you also have the merge mine blocks that can come in as well at a interval of roughly about 180 seconds. And basically what this does, it lends itself incredibly well to scaling Bitcoin. So in times of high fees, you can basically port over or peg into this sidechain and then move your Bitcoin around and then leave whenever you need to, or you feel fees have returned back to their normal rate. But it also has support for blob data storage for digital assets. So if you are into that stuff, go for it. Yeah, that's what it's built for. And then Alice is basically a drop-in federated EVM chain that aims to extend the functionality of Bitcoin. So you can basically build your smart contracts and such on top of Alice, and from there, use them, and again, peg back into Bitcoin when you're done with that process. Currently, both node implementations are open sourced, and they function against testnet 3. And visualized, this is actually kind of my little node I stood up, and this is for Coordinate. And the best way I figured out to run this, you basically build Coordinate, and then you create a systemd file so that you can run it as a background service. So you just run it. You got a question? The answer is no. No token. I mean, we have the asset that's one-to-one pegged to Bitcoin, but there is no... What kind of asset? Bitcoin, yeah. Sorry for not explaining that. Developer. So the main thing about building on Coordinate that's really nice specifically is that it mimics building on Bitcoin incredibly well. Because Coordinate is a direct fork of Bitcoin Core 0.26, most RPC calls are completely compatible. The systemd file I just mentioned to get it started running as a server or a service you can use, it literally is the exact same file, just a different daemon name. So with that said, there are some nodes. So if you're building on Coordinate, there are libraries that exist that are very powerful. Rust Bitcoin comes to mind, or the Python Bitcoin lib. Those don't work wholly out of the box because not all RPC calls are exactly the same. So you may ask for create new transaction, and so that create new transaction call will work on Bitcoin, obviously. Coordinate's pretty close, but you do have to do some modifications to be able to use that. We have done a lot of the heavy lifting for the Rust Bitcoin library, but not for any other language. So there is an open source Rust Coordinate lib, same exact kind of flavor as the Bitcoin lib for Rust right now. It's very easy to use, very powerful. So essentially, if you want to get started with building Coordinate, my suggestion, and this, I'm not talking, because we do have a actual like public RPC endpoint you can call and use, but you shouldn't use public endpoints for everything. But you'll basically go to the Coordinate GitHub as part of the Anduro project. From there, you can clone this repository. To clone a repository basically means just copy it over to your own local machine. After that, there are some steps you've got to take, and there are docs as a part of like the document section. And from there, you can just run the different, copy paste the different commands in, and you'll build yourself an instance of Coordinate. From there, you can basically fire it up. It will work. It'll be just like Bitcoin when you fire it up. You'll literally see the log start, Coordinate D, version starting, goes down the list. You see blocks start syncing, coming in, and you can sync to the chain tip that way. So the next thing is, though, with Coordinate specifically, there are a few notable things about it, and that is that by default, it will attempt to connect to Bitcoin mainnet. That's why you need to make sure that you have the testnet flag, -- testnet. So you do Coordinate D -- testnet, and it'll boot up to testnet 3, and then it'll sync all the blocks, because that is the most active chain right now. The second thing is, like, if you're going to build on top of Coordinate, you'll also probably want to access that RPC. In the same fashion that Bitcoin doesn't give you access to the RPC by default, you can use basically these settings here to get access to the RPC, get blocks, transactions, balances, etc. So server 1, what that command is, basically I'm setting up Coordinate as a server to take in RPC commands. By the way, RPC is like remote procedure calls. Think of like a command line, but for Coordinate. You tell it like, hey, I'm looking for this, get raw transaction, it'll give you a transaction. Get block hash, gives you a block hash. Bind, this one basically means that any computer outside of, like on your local network, can access your Coordinate D node. That's very nice if you want to run it on a separate machine and dev on a local machine like I do. And then the last one, to secure your instance of your RPC. And by the way, this applies to Bitcoin Core too, so you can use this knowledge in 2 places. You're going to want an RPC username and password in that configuration file. So, but yeah, at that point, like all you really got to do to test that you did everything right is whatever the IP address is that you set up your Coordinate D node on, you just go to HTTP, IP address, and then port 18332, and it'll give you a little hello. I think it says like I think it says something along the lines of like expected to be connected to via some source, but it's just a message. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, you'll get basically a error 502. And then there are 2 kind of smaller applications that have been built out by developers so far. And that is Tidwell's ScaleBridge application. And then a little less superior application, but just more of a tech demo of what's possible, that this is how you interact with the node. A small, like little basically block hash lottery that I created. So essentially people can put transactions in, it'll compare the closest TX hash during that time period to the block header that is mined next on Bitcoin mainnet. We'll pay out the users in this CBTC token that they then can peg out for actual Bitcoin. Yeah, so those are the 2. There's also a Cortiscan.io, which is a blockchain explorer. That is currently down, but it will be back up. Any questions? Okay, so Enduro and compatibility. So basically Enduro is like the kind of the umbrella, but each sidechain has its own like quirks and features, etc. Alice is very straightforward. It literally is just pure EVM other than the peg-in, peg-out process and quantity of these individual assets. Coordinate, though, is a little bit different in the fact that it is backwards compatible with Bitcoin, so you can use Bitcoin transactions and formulate them like Bitcoin templates, but it actually has more features, so you can't use all of Coordinate's features and port them back over to Bitcoin. So with that said, yeah, so many calls will work exactly the same as they would in Bitcoin Core. Like get block hash works great, but create raw transaction, you will have to add some extra parameters in there for the additional features that Coordinate adds, specifically digital assets. And then next is like peg-in, peg-out processes. That is not a part of both chains, or sorry, a part of Bitcoin mainnet, but they're a part of the side chains. And that is basically whatever token you obtain on the side chain, you can exchange back into Bitcoin at a 1-to-1 ratio. Okay, we'll see how I'm doing on time. Okay. I already went over the RPC. Okay, so the RPC, getting to know your node. So there are pretty extensive docs on, so we have an API doc that is available that will list all the RPC commands and how they've been modified to be able to use them with coordinates specifically. And those calls are basically in the exact same way you do for Bitcoin Core. You would just use your program, Python, Rust, call the REST interface, get your data that you need, and I think that's pretty much it for that section, because we've already been over the RPC. Okay, gotcha is like small little pitfalls. Pegin process does have a spec. So one thing about the pegin, like if you try to do multiple op returns or multiple outputs into, like, I'm gonna peg into the pegin address with 2 outputs going to the same address, it won't credit all of them. It credits the first output and the first op return. That is it, nothing else. When you do coordinates specifically, do dash testnet. Pre-conf transactions need to be resubmitted after the next block comes through if yours did not get accepted. There are occasional RPC bugs. I did find one the other day. I was using it and I pegged in manually, so not using like the web wallet that's available. I did like actually wrote a Python script and then created the op return, created the outputs, and didn't credit it on my wallet in the coordinate D node. That has been since patched, but if you do find these kind of things, definitely submit an issue on GitHub. That'd be fantastic. Economic dust is not credited on coordinate, and that is primarily because that can be abused by people to essentially keep basically using coordinate to peg in these transactions, and then Anduro is responsible for the consolidation. That's not good. So, and then there's no default wallet created on the coordinate D node. This is the same as Bitcoin, but with that said, yeah, if you're gonna build your first app, do create wallet, so coordinate D, -CLI, create wallet, and then the wallet name, and then you'll be able to access all the functionality of like generate new address, etc. And the final thing is there are some resources as well. You got the Enduro GitHub, Coordinate Blockchain Explorer, the Enduro wallet is available, Alice Blockchain Explorer, and there's an Enduro portal. These are links that if this slideshow ever makes it anywhere, you can click, and that kind of might help you through the building process of your first Enduro application. That's it, guys. Woo! Thank you. Woo! Good. Questions? The block time for there's 3, because remember there's 2 chains. The EVM, I believe, is 12 seconds. 15. Yeah, 2 separate block times. There is the 180-second block time for the merge mine blocks. So those are the blocks that the regular miners that like Marathon, Foundry, etc. could work on solving these blocks. Their hashes would go towards that. That would be a random time though, on average, just like Bitcoin blocks. But we also have the collective sign blocks that basically are signed for, proof of authority, that every 1 minute will come in. Oh, the question was, what are the block times for Enduro sidechains? What's the question? No, so in terms of the merge mine component, 80% I believe goes to the miner, 20% to the federation right now.
So in the case of coordinate, there's 2 types of transactions. The ones that are purely mined, 100% of the revenue goes to the miners. However, if you use a federation for the high time preference, 80% of that is held over for the miners. Any other questions? More to come later. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.